We're back. You're back. We're all back in the smoke-filled room after taking a week off for Thanksgiving. And those words, you ask Michael and Chris, those words haven't been said since we've been doing this for the last year and a half. We actually haven't taken a week off. So it was pretty exciting to get a few minutes to spend time with family over Thanksgiving. I don't know about you guys, but I'm still eating Thanksgiving leftovers. My lunch today was glorious. So hopefully you all are putting on some pounds for the holidays. We've got some political topics to talk about in what might be our last episode of the year. We're still trying to figure out what our plan for December might be, but with things slowing down a little bit before we get into the local elections, this might be our only episode in December. So no pressure to our guests, but you got to be good enough to make this thing last all the month of December. So no pressure, but let's get into who we have with us today because we've got some awesome guests with us. We have Travis Weaver. He's the state representative for the 93rd District and has been a guest before. Travis, thanks for coming back.
It's always a pleasure, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
I mean, the real key is, can we get people to come twice? Everyone could be dumb enough to come on one time, but if you come a second time, then we know we hopefully have done something right. So that's good news. Glad to have you.
Yeah, I'm proud to be a sucker. Anything for the party.
I like it. Sucker wearing a seersucker, though you aren't, but you could probably pull it off. You seem like the guy who could. I can't, so you have to do it for both of us. We also have with us attorney and former chairman of the Illinois Republican Party and longtime party volunteer, donor, leader, Don Tracy. Don, we're glad we could have you on with us today.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for starting us off with such a high level of energy. That should keep us rolling.
Yeah, if there's one thing I don't lack, it's energy. Brains, political talent, those things are still to be decided, but energy, I got us covered. We also have with us returning guest Dennis Cook. He's the president of Strive Strategies Group, and I'm pumped because usually he has the better setup than I do on these podcasts, even though it's my podcast. So for once, Dennis, you make me look good. I appreciate it, buddy.
Not a problem. Glad to be back, though. Glad to be back.
And Dennis has been putting up with a lot of stuff today, so he might be just as cranky as Chris Jackowiak, our notorious cranky or political expert. So we might have two people that we're going to have to make fun of or tease a little bit in the negativity department. Chris, how's your mood today?
It's doing about the same as it always is, Collin. Constant state of melancholy and despondency that gets me through my life. So glad to be here.
I got to get that boy a pack of cigs or something. My goodness. And to balance Chris out, we have the ever happy and joyous Michael Butler bringing the positivity here. What's up, Michael?
That's right. Good to be here. It's cold out there today, but we're all inside, so it's good.
It's even cold in Butlerville?
Oh, yeah. Freezing. Jeez, the wind is intense.
Well, glad to see you're surviving. Up by us, it's been cold for a while, but,
It was 56 yesterday, so it's a big change.
Yeah, we hit down towards zero with lake effect. So you're don't complain too much.
We're at 21
in Springfield with huge wind chill factor.
Yeah, there you go. It's sheesh. It's rough out there. Speaking of it being rough out there, let's talk about the election. So 2024 was the opposite of rough when we talk about national and Donald Trump's success at the ballot box throughout the country. So let's talk about a number of topics related to what just happened in the 2024 election. It's been a month. Can't believe I'm saying that it's been a month. It doesn't feel like it. We've had some time now to digest what happened. And so through the first portion of this week's podcast, we're going to really get into what happened and what we've seen, the analysis we've seen, what we agree with, what we don't agree with. We're going to start here with turnout. What was pretty clear is you saw turnout up in red areas, but down in blue areas. Even here in Illinois, you saw turnout the lowest in 28 years in the city of Chicago. In Cook County, throughout Cook County, turnout was lower at 66.5%, lower than it has been for a while. Same in DuPage and Lake, it was lower. But then you get to more of the exurban areas and rural areas, and you start to find that turnout actually had gone up. We see that in Canaan, McHenry, and Will, where turnout was actually better than average. We saw it Butler in a lot of your regions in central and southern Illinois, and this is something we saw nationwide. If you look at the states with the largest changes in their turnout, 9 out of 10 of the states that saw increases were red or purple states. Meanwhile, 7 out of 10 that saw decreases were blue states. So this was a trend we saw nationally. I want to open it up to you all. What did you guys see in the turnout, and what do you think led to that?
In my region, a lot of the counties were, 70%, like high 60s, like 68%, 70%, 72%. And I think that kind of plays into what you were saying there, Collin, where, a lot of these red Republican areas or counties that were more rural saw like significantly higher turnout than, we would expect. And then some of the counties that are, more Democrat leaning or more, urban or suburban had problems with turnout. And I think a lot of that is there's a lot of excitement on the Republican side. People were, motivated to go out and vote for Trump. And they, it was a lot of people wanted change. And they didn't think that Kamala was going to provide change. That was going to be more of the same. So I think
she even admitted it, right? That she would do nothing different than Joe Biden. And I think the voters decided how they felt about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise of the election was the low turnout for Democrat areas. I didn't see that coming. I knew, obviously Biden was not it wouldn't surprise me if Biden had stayed on the ticket that we would have low Democrat turnout. But once Harris got involved and there was all this buzz and the joy factor and all that, I really didn't expect low Democrat turnout. So the question is, why was it so low? Trump himself is a turnout machine, but on both sides. What we heard over and over in 2020 is that the election wasn't rigged. It was just Biden got 76 million votes or something like that, a historic,
80 million, yeah.
80 million, whatever it was historic. And people said, well, he got it because Trump turned out more Democrats who hated him than he turned out Republicans. So, but I don't see that the people that hate Trump have really changed a lot in the last 4 years. So what accounts for it? I really don't know. I would suggest something I haven't heard people talk about is that maybe election integrity had something to do with it. What a lot of people don't realize is that for 40 years, the RNC, the Republican National Committee, could not engage in election integrity because of a injunction by a New Jersey judge over one incident that lasted for 10 years. And then he continued it for 3 more times and kept it going until he died. And they got a new district judge who eliminated that for the 2020 election. So 2020 was the first year the RNC was able to do election integrity on at a presidential level. And I thought Ronna McDaniel did a great job for her first time. But we learned a lot. The RNC learned a lot from that, and really and then after all the concerns about the 2020 election, and where Biden got all those extra votes, and there were so many irregularities because of the historic voting by mail election, RNC, Republicans everywhere, local people have been working on election integrity here in Illinois. I appointed the first election integrity committee I think Illinois has ever had. It's a very active working committee. We hired our first election integrity director, and that was just Illinois, and it wasn't a battleground state. So if we did that here, can you imagine with a lot more resources what they were doing in all the battleground states? They formed a whole new department of election integrity, and it started from zero. And I think last count there were 30 or 40 lawyers. They were involved in 120 lawsuits. In the past, we always got out-lawyered by the Democrats. Certainly in 2020, we got out-lawyered by it. This didn't happen. There was a lot of focus on that, recruitment of thousands of election judges and poll watchers all over the country, thousands of lawyers. So, with that kind of scrutiny and that kind of election integrity operation, I would suspect if you were a fraudster, a vote fraudster, you were probably, thinking this might not be the election to do it. So I don't know. I'm just suggesting that maybe election integrity, robust election integrity might have a little something to do with the low Democrat turnout.
Well, and I think one thing that's definitely not talked about enough, to your point, Don, about 2020 being the vote by mail election, if you look at the states that saw such significant vote drop in 2024, a lot of those states were states that had mailed out their vote by mail ballots, and they had pushed vote by mail as a significant voting method, including some of those states. I think most of those top 10 states had forced vote by mail elections, or at least many of them did. So people don't talk a lot about how the election we're comparing to, which was 2020, was the COVID election, where you saw so much vote by mail and early voting. So that's a good point.
And people will tell you that study this, that fraud is easiest with vote by mail. And the other point about that too, you just reminded me of, Collin, is that it wasn't just that the RNC and Republican organizations throughout the country, and especially in the battleground states, had way better election integrity operations. In some cases previously, they didn't have any at all. but also the red states passed a lot of legislation that tightened up voting rules and eliminated a lot of the abuses, like unsupervised drop boxes, like no voter ID, like people giving out, Democrat activists giving out free water and hamburgers to long lines in Fulton County, Georgia. And many other things like that were gamed. Drive-by voting in Houston, Texas. Things like that were gamed in 2020 at a minimum, were tightened up by many of the states, and especially the red battleground states.
Yeah. Travis, Dennis, Chris, anything you guys saw in the turnout that intrigued you?
Well,
go ahead, Dennis.
No, real quick. Let's locally again, looking at Illinois, where Will County's numbers got better, and because of Will County's numbers getting better, we were able to pick off Annette Parker. That was a nice pickup. Now that's something to build off of, right? Just look at those numbers. What happened across the county? Now, some of these state rep districts were harder, right? As we know, they're just the way they're cut. I don't know if everybody will be successful in some of these pickup opportunities in the future, but countywide, I think there's something to be said about what we saw in Will County. Now, if we could take that and replicate that maybe in Kane and pick up some other seats in Will down the road, that'd be great. And maybe one day in DuPage, but one day.
Sticking with Don's point on voter ID, just because we did a good job in the 2024 election federally, we've got to keep our foot on the gas on this voter ID stuff and remind people that it's not a Trump thing. It's not a election interference thing. It's the fact that 46 of our 47 European allies have voter ID laws. Our Asian allies, Japan, has voter ID laws. Southern Hemisphere, Australia has voter ID laws. You cannot make an argument against it that is plausible. The argument for it is whether we have integrity in our elections or not, we need to have people that trust our elections. And until we start to get voter ID incorporated into our elections, we're not going to have that. So I think that we got to keep our foot down on voter ID. And I think also the repercussion of that is we tend to lose in mail-in. I don't know how you have mail-in without voter ID. Give people a month to go vote, early voting, all for it. You can still do exceptions for things like people in the military that need to have mail-in, but you just really narrow that down. So we got to stay tight on that. With the voter turnout, one thing that really inspired me is thinking about the fact that President Trump got 2.4 million votes. You look back at 2022, Governor Pritzker got 2.2 million votes. So the votes are out there for us to win in an off-cycle governor's year if we can get the turnout to be there. Trump's a turnout machine. That's a really tall hill to climb. It's an easy thing to say. It's a hard thing to do. But the seeds are out there. They're planted. We just got to go harvest them. And that's the hard work, but we can do it. One other thing I would remind folks is that we talk a lot about how much better Trump did in 24 versus 20, right? I think Illinois moved like 8 or 9 points to the right. But the reality is that Harris got 54.8% of the vote, and Pritzker got 54.6% of the vote. So even though he made an improvement since 2020, we still actually lost 0.2 percentage points from our last gubernatorial election. And the reason I say that is because we were hoping that we were going to pick up some House seats in this cycle. We were hoping that we could pick up 3. Picking up 1 would be great progress. We got to start moving north. But as long as we have these maps, it's going to be really challenging. I just want to really make that clear to folks, because one thing that you hear is Illinois is getting more conservative, as proven by the Trump 20 versus 24 results. Why are we not seeing that result and picking up more House seats? Well, the reality is the map that was drawn for the first time in 22 versus the election that happened in 24, really very minimal difference, right? 54.6 for Pritzker, 54.8 for Harris. So we've got to continue to see that start to improve. And in 2026, hopefully we win back a seat. We're going to be right back at the battle. But gosh, when Jelly Bean is writing $100 million checks, that's just going to be a tough battle to fight.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. But one thing I'll say is redistricting's not going anywhere. Everyone keeps pointing at redistricting, and obviously I've done my rant on this whole thing, so I won't do it again. But redistricting is going to continue to be a problem in 26 and 28 and 30. And if we don't get out of the superminority by 2030, we have no say in the next map, and then we're going to complain and bitch and moan about redistricting for another 10 years. So you're right that the maps are difficult, no doubt about that. But we're going to have to find a way to work around that, because we got to get get out of the superminority in the next 3 cycles. Otherwise, this is just going to keep perpetuating.
Well, I
Okay,
think
I
back to what
agree with
Trump.
you, but I think our bigger opportunity is actually to win statewide. We can win this governor's seat. You think about a gentleman that I respect a lot, Senator Bailey, great man, probably not ever a candidate that was going to do well in the city or the Collier counties, probably never a candidate that was going to win statewide, and gets outspent 16-1, and Pritzker beats him 55 to 45, right? It was less than 10 points. It was a 9-point victory. You compare that with what you see in New York, Massachusetts, California, where they win by 30, right? We can make up that 10-point gap with a winning candidate who doesn't get outspent 16-1. So once JB's wishes come true and he goes into some federal administration or he makes his run for the federal level, we'll be done with him, and hopefully that spending margin will be cut to 3-1. 3-1 spending margin with a winning candidate. We can win statewide. Huge. You're so right. We got to be out of the superminority, but if we get a statewide win, it's probably going to happen inevitably.
Yeah, I agree with all that. But back to the Trump vote. I saw a preliminary analysis just a week or two old that said Trump only got like 2 more votes in 2024 in Illinois, 2 more than he got in 2020. And here in Sangamon County, he did worse than he did, and he got fewer than he got in 2020. So it really was more of a low turnout Democrat election than it was Trump getting more votes.
Chris, any final thoughts from you before we go to the next topic?
Well, I want to kind of touch on the enthusiasm topic that Butler mentioned earlier. Is that I think a lot of the enthusiasm on the Democratic side was artificially manufactured after Biden dropped out and they did the switcheroo to put Harris in there, because a lot of the Democratic operative base and activist base was more riled up with Kamala Harris than they were Joe Biden. But that did not necessarily translate into more action items done for Harris that were being done for Biden. And it didn't necessarily affect turnout. Probably if Biden was still the nominee, you probably would have seen even lower Democratic turnout. It would have probably fluctuated from place to place, of course. But I think that was it. And I think Republicans, Trump had said various points during this election, like, you just got to vote this time. You never got to vote again, guys. And, whether or not that was a smart idea for the big man to do, the fact of the matter is that I do think a lot of particularly young voters had in their minds, like, this is the last time I can vote for Donald Trump. I got to make sure I vote. Because if I don't vote now, then I can never say I voted for Donald Trump. So I think that there was a lot more enthusiasm by the Republican Party because they recognized that this was more of an existential race. If Trump can't win this election, then nobody can never win for the Republican Party ever again. They came out, they supported him, and now the question of the Republican Party as well as people ever vote Republican again.
Let's talk about some of the other trends we saw in the data. So one thing we've talked about a handful of times, but it bears repeating because it was huge, are the gains Trump made amongst Latino voters. You saw that President Biden won in 2020 by a 23-point margin amongst Latino voters, and yet Trump beat Harris by a 12-point margin in 2024. That's a huge 35-point swing. It's significant, and obviously each state had slightly different percentages, but it was more amongst Latino men than it was with Latino women, but still, it was a huge swing. Now, we're not seeing that all the way down ticket. Not every Republican is benefiting from that, as we've talked about. We've got work to do, but the fact that they were willing to vote for Donald Trump means there's an opening there for Republicans. We just got to do some more work to actually take advantage of it.
Well, I think you saw that with this demographic and some other demographics where, you've got people that they're Trump supporters. They're not necessarily Republicans. And, this is the last time that, Donald Trump is going to be on the ballot. He's, this is his second term. This is the end. We as Republicans have to work on converting some of those people from Trump supporters to Republicans, where they're voting, Republican for state rep and county board and county-wide offices and things of that nature. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities out there, but it's up to, each of us and the Republican Party, across the country to take advantage of that, because obviously they're open to supporting people
Well, wait, and Michael, we've seen, I mean, the economic message that Trump ran on that it resonated with Latino voters. Meanwhile, and we'll talk about this a lot more later on, but Democrats really hyper focusing on social issues and cultural issues just doesn't resonate with Latino households that tend to be a bit more socially conservative. So, we've been talking about this for years. I remember I just spoke at an event that I'd spoke at, almost every year for going back 5 or 6 years, and they said that I had said this years ago that as Democrats keep chasing the liberal white suburban women, they're leaving their base behind, including Hispanics, and we just saw it bigly, if you will, using the Trumpism in this last election.
I think one of the issues that the Republican Party is going to run into with courting Latino voters, even though I strongly support Republicans reaching out to these voters, is that where Latinos have the heaviest concentrations, within the city of Chicago and some of the suburbs outside of Chicagoland. None of these areas have really competitive races down ballot because of Voting Rights Act, gerrymandering, any of those factors. So it's very difficult for the Republican Party to run capable Republican candidates in these districts that are so heavily Democratic and actually make a significant gain. Because if you're an up and coming Republican Latino, are you going to want to run in a D plus 30 district? Do you want to run against Edgar Gonzalez? I don't want to. I wouldn't encourage anybody else to do the same. But I do think that there are gains that the Republican Party can make from a statewide perspective or a countywide perspective with Latino areas within the county, and that could be more beneficial to helping down ballot Republicans. I think the issue from a legislative perspective is that we just don't have. I'm not blaming the maps, but it's just the fact of the matter is that these are D plus 30 districts. The House caucus isn't. I mean, I don't know what the way the House runs itself nowadays, but I don't think they're going to want to run candidates strong races in D plus 30 districts.
Makes sense. I mean, so the Jake Peterson, a friend for a long time, had a great op-ed in the Chicago Tribune. I'm going to read a few excerpts here and then ask you guys for your thoughts because I thought it was a really well-read or well-written op-ed. So for one of the first lines, I'm a proud first-generation college-educated and gay Mexican-American with undocumented family in the U.S., including a mother who was previously deported, and I experienced homelessness as a child. I'm everything Democrats claim to support, right? Wrong. And he goes into how Democrats have been focusing more on the culture issues and not actually helping with a lot of the challenges he faced. Two other things I'll quickly read here, two other excerpts. One, seeing my undocumented family members who have been in the U.S. for more than 20 years work, pay taxes, and buy their own homes with zero benefits, then watching millions of new migrants skip the line with government-funded help only inflame me and other Latinos like me. When my mother came to America as a single mother of two, she didn't get any of these benefits. This election became personal. It was about my family. And then towards the end, he talks about how it was more than just immigration. It talks about how Mexican-born Americans are the youngest demographic in the U.S. And what matters to them are obtaining jobs and paying the cost of living, buying a home, growing and helping their family, and making sure the American dream is attainable. And over the last 4 years, all that has become harder. Great op-ed, and there were some really, I thought, solid points in there. Curious if anyone has thoughts on any of that.
Well, I think the solution to this problem is that you need to create you take advantage of this. You need to create a brand for the Republican Party that makes more young Latinos identify with the Republican Party, because right now they might identify with Trump, they might identify with no party, they might identify with the Democratic Party, but they're not identifying with the Republican Party. So you need to find acceptable liaisons within that community, meaning from a statewide perspective. Is Darren Bailey going to be that person? Probably not. I don't know if he's going to be able to appeal to Latinos and move them to saying,
let's put that as the cap and the quota of Bailey references for this episode. Can we all agree on that?
Right, but you know what I mean by that, Collin, is you can't just be Trump without the charisma and expect all these Latino voters are going to start voting for you, which has been the problem for the Republican Party for the past 8 years.
Well, so I think we obviously need to diversify. I mean, let's be real. Let's be honest. There are 6 white dudes on this podcast right now. I mean, Lane and Abby and our team work really hard to find females and minorities who will come on, and we've had some great ones who've joined us. But I mean, we have still work to do, and we recognize that.
Yeah, I struggled with this share of the party. How do you crack the minority code, not just with Hispanics? And I finally concluded that it's just going to take a charismatic Republican candidate, maybe a charismatic Republican statewide candidate. But I think in the meantime, Trump, I think Chris is right in a sense that I think Trump is kind of showed us how to do it, and that's by recognizing that our party is sort of transitioning into the party of working families, and Hispanic families are certainly working families. I mean, even though there are some welfare abuses there, and what some of the states are doing to these new illegal immigrants, is counter to that. But the people have been there, like whoever wrote the editorial that you just read. They're not here for the welfare. They're here to work and support their families, and that's a Republican virtue. So I think it just seems to me that we just need to continue that transition and build on it and promote it if we're going to attract more Hispanics, not just to top of the ticket, but down ticket.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things we don't talk about enough. I mean, it's, again, going back to that op-ed, getting a job, paying that cost of living, buying a home. I mean, Republicans don't talk about that, that opportunity to live the American dream, have your own piece of land, your own home, and start your own family. These are foundational tenets of our Republican Party. I think, to your point, Don, having a good candidate at the top of the ticket who can speak to that is really, really helpful for us. I think overall, as a party, we got to get better about talking about those things that we're going to do to help working families and help make their lives easier and better in this state. Because Democrats, as we know, are making it harder and more expensive to live in this state. And so what's that Republican alternative? We're getting better at it, but we still got a lot of work to do.
Well, and I also think we've got to kind of diversify our messaging a little bit. I mean, you look at some of the things that Trump was talking about in this campaign that, people, reporters and longtime Republicans were like pulling their hair out. Like, can you believe Trump said that? Can you believe he's running that ad? And then look at his numbers and how he improved with some of these demographics. I mean, we've complained and complained and complained about, the messaging in Illinois this cycle was, well, Democrats voted to raise your taxes. They voted to raise the gas tax. They voted to raise the income tax. They voted on this bill or that bill. And obviously that wasn't resonating with people. And then you've got Trump out there talking about men and women's sports, and Kamala Harris is for they them, and Trump is for you. Obviously those things resonated with certain.
You're a little bit of oversimplification there, Michael, and I'll just simply point out Trump was running other ads as well about the economy and jobs and fair trade, and there were a lot of ads as well. I mean, we hyper focus on the transgender stuff, but they were doing a lot more, especially in swing states. So let's not. I don't want to be on this podcast telling everybody just go out and talk about transgendered sports and we're going to go win elections in Illinois. That's not the advice we're looking to give here.
Sure.
Sticking on the Latino thing, I do agree. I think we can do a lot better job, and I hope that we don't fall into this trap that I think that the Democrats fall into, which means if you're going to win somebody over, it means that you need to look and talk like them. It does not take us having a Latino Hispanic person who speaks Spanish in order to win Latino votes. Look at President Trump and J.D. Vance, long ways away from being Hispanic, but they were able to make inroads into those communities because they handled themselves in a way that they were respected by them, and because they spoke to issues that are important to them. When I think about people that I know in the Hispanic community, the words that come to mind for me are faith-based, family-oriented, hardworking. That's the Republican Party. That is us. We can win on those messaging points. We've just got to stick on message and speak in a way that resonates with that community. I think historically the Democrats have kind of taken them and said that, these are our voters, and have kind of claimed their territory. But the reality is, just because the Democrats have claimed territory doesn't mean that they have any right to it. It's just a free country. And I think that we can do a great job in those communities, but we got to have the confidence to go into those communities, to know what their issues are, to be able to speak their language, not their actual language, but the language of what is important to them. And I hope that we're going to fall into this trap of thinking, if we're going to do that, we got to have a Hispanic person who speaks Spanish. The Democrats play identity politics. I don't think we need to.
And be there year round instead of just during an election. I heard that, again and again when I was trying to do minority outreach. And the RNC actually initiated a strategy to do that under Ronna McDaniel's leadership, starting, I think, before even 2020, by setting up Hispanic community centers and key, like Milwaukee and key battleground locations. Which I'm sure had some impact on the recent election.
Well, and I think to your point, Travis, it doesn't mean we have to do away with our current leaders and spokespeople. We don't have to just say you're not allowed to go speak to Hispanic voters because you're not brown skinned. So that I agree with. But I think diversifying our party and bringing in more of those voices and giving them a seat at the table also will help as well. So I think it's definitely not an either or situation. And the more that we do, clearly, as we've been talking about, the votes are there, they're available, but we got to do more to go win them. Let's keep moving along, guys, and let's talk about this. J.B. Pritzker was convinced that this was the election of abortion, that it was going to be abortion, abortion, abortion. That's how we're going to win. And what we saw with this election was yet again, for the third election in a row, because it happened in 2022, it happened in 2023, and now we saw it happen in 2024, that female turnout was down. And actually, we saw that Harris only won amongst women with 8 points when Biden won women by 15 points. That's a huge change in what was supposed to be the abortion election. And what really puzzled them was the fact that abortion-related referendums pretty much all won. A few didn't, but most of them won around the country. And yet you saw this change in the numbers for Trump amongst women. They just can't get over the fact that women are actually not monolithic, that they actually do think about something other than just abortion 24/7. Democrats really struggle with this concept that women are actually working professionals nowadays, that they manage the budget, they think finances, they care about the economy and jobs and immigration and, more than just one issue, because, it's more than half the voters. This isn't just a minority coalition that you could say they're a one issue target. Democrats still struggle with that, which I'm glad they do, but clearly this was not the abortion election, and Democrats definitely missed the mark on this one.
I think that the midterm election was the abortion election. And partly that was because the Dobbs decision came out just a few months before the election and kind of caught Republicans by surprise. And the Democrats had a lot more, they always have a lot more money, to outspend us, and particularly this issue here in Illinois. I think they outspend us on abortion ads, 5-1, 10-1, something like that. And they convinced a large segment of the voting population that the Republican position was zero abortions, no exceptions. And I think that's what a lot of those referendums say. But the public is more nuanced than that. And in that election, given the short time span and the lack of money, we weren't able to communicate that really it's the Democrats that have the extreme positions on abortion. No exceptions at all, or no restrictions at all. Late term abortion, etc. Whereas most Republicans are for reasonable restrictions on abortion. And so there's a lot of nuance to abortion. I don't think people had time to understand before the election of 2022. And this time, we all saw how that hurt us in 2022. I think the Republican Party nationally and locally got better at communicating the nuances of abortion. For example, in the suburbs in 2022 people would go door to door and someone would say, "What's your position on abortion? Are you pro-life or pro-choice?" And if you said pro-life, a lot of people would shut the door. And what we tried to tell candidates in this last election is when you get that question, you say, "Well, I think that a parent should be notified of a minor abortion. What do you think?" Or "I'm opposed to late-term abortion. What do you think?" Or "I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. What do you think?" Or "I'm opposed to abortion. What do you think?" Get into a conversation instead of a label. So bottom line, I just think the Republican Party nationally and locally got better at talking about this. The voting population learned that there's a lot more nuance than just no abortion or all abortion. So I think that made it less of an issue.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Don.
Trump helped in that regard by saying it's a state's issue.
I think you're spot on, because we got to do such a better job of educating the public on what these stances mean. I think everybody thinks of it as binary, right? You're either pro-choice or you're pro-choice. I think that they're pro-life or you're pro-choice. I think there's actually 3 buckets: pro-life, pro-choice, and pro-abortion. Pro-life is those of us that believe in exceptions, but are generally pro-life. Pro-choice is really where the Democrats were 20 years ago: safe, legal, and rare, right? Nobody likes it. Nobody wants to encourage it. This is not a good thing for our society, but gosh, I think in some instances, maybe it makes sense. That's pro-choice. Pro-abortion, that's what we have right now with Governor Pritzker: 9 months, taxpayer funded, no parental notification. And so if you talk to somebody and they are a classic pro-choicer, there's a lot of instances where they may be even closer to us as pro-lifers than they are to the governor as a pro-abortion fanatic. And you look at where we are as a state, right? 9-month abortions. There's no other of our allies that are at the position. That's like where North Korea and China are. You look at nations like our European allies, generally there's a first trimester ban. Nobody wants this late term abortion nonsense that we're allowing here in the state of Illinois. And I just think that the more that we can kind of get to this issue and raise awareness on it, the more that we're going to have success. And I also think a big part of it is just fatigue on the issue. You know, there's 15% of voters where pro-abortion is their number one stance, but they're going to vote Democrat no matter what. We're never going to win that voter. Everybody else who maybe they're pro-choice, but it's a lower item for them, I think that they're just sick of hearing about it, especially if you live in a state of Illinois where your abortion rights are covered, period, and there's nothing that we can do in the General Assembly or that the president could ever do to restrict that. Is that still going to be your number one thing when there's nothing that's going to happen to it anyway, and you're kind of tired of hearing about it? Oh, and by the way, your groceries cost 50% more than they're supposed to be. So I think that we're really just seeing a lot of fatigue on that, and it's not the issue that the Democrats want.
Well, and Travis, to your point, AP exit polls showed that it was 11% for abortion. That was the number of people who said it's what drove their vote. So it's even less than the 15 you said, and that's 35% said the economy, 21 or 22% said immigration. So yeah, you're absolutely right on that point that it's not the top issue driving people's votes. As to why that is, obviously there's a lot of discussion to be had around that, but it certainly wasn't the issue that drove this election. You saw it in the results.
And even within that 11% column, a portion of that is the right wing of that, the other end of the spectrum, where people are showing up to vote because of the pro-life issue for one reason or another. But my big thing on this is that, when you give the average voter the A/B test, do you think abortion should be legal? 66% or whatever, they're going to say, yeah, I think that should be no problem, whatever. But on every other issue, they might agree with us. And after 2022, I think there was a lot of anxiety amongst those like passive pro-choice people that wow, the Dobbs decision came down. There's no federal right to an abortion anymore. Things are going to start changing. What's going to happen? Okay, maybe we got to vote Democrat this year, whatever. Now that it's 2024, the writing's kind of on the wall for a lot of these states as to what they're going to be doing with abortion. And in Illinois, it's pretty much supplanted in law right now, thanks to Governor Rauner, that abortion is going to be legal in the state of Illinois. So at this point, people came to the conclusion abortion is going to be legal. I can now vote on other issues again. That's what I think happened.
Well, and I think the other thing that you see there is, when this becomes the issue for some voters, they may make that their votes, but we're seeing really this had an impact beyond just the female vote. Dennis had to deal with this in some of his races in DuPage County, and we've all dealt with it in Lake and DuPage. Sure, there's a region where there's higher income, higher wealth, higher education, where the abortion issue proves that extremism argument. So it isn't about the issue itself; it's about that larger message, and that's where we've got work to do. But our data has shown, Chris, as you said, that most voters want it legal, but they're comfortable and actually want to see some common sense restrictions on it. There's that nuanced approach that Travis talked about, and the more we're able to get people to understand that Republicans actually live in that common sense space, it's the Democrats who are extreme. That's when we can start to see those results start to change in places like DuPage and Lake. All right, let's keep moving along. Next thing here, and then we'll get into some more specific topics here. Young voters. We can probably do this one fairly quickly. This is just one that shocked me. When the exit polls tested people under 30, they found that Harris only won by 5 points nationwide among those that are 30 or under. Biden won that demographic, that age group, by 25 points. That's a 20-point swing. I'm more curious than anything what you guys think. What might have led to that? These are exit polls. We don't have the exact data yet. We're going to get that in the coming weeks. So will it be actually 20 points? Maybe not. It might be down more in the teens, but you did see that younger voters were a lot more willing to vote for Trump and Republicans than they had been in the past. Curious why you guys think that might be.
Well, as the youngest person on the podcast, can I speak first, Collin? I think a lot of it.
I don't think anyone would believe that's true, even though I know that it is.
I know. I have the hairline of
you got a lot of age on those bones, my man.
I know. Hairline of a 40-year-old and political charisma of an 80-year-old. In any case, a lot of the thing about the younger voters is we're not dealing with like the millennial generation anymore. That was, that gave Obama his victories. That was really, energized for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and those other elections. We're not dealing with millennials anymore. We're dealing with Zoomers as our young Americans. And Zoomers are far more conservative, according to polling, than the millennial generation is because of a number of issues. I mean, these are people who had to live through high school during COVID, so they might be, more, sensitive on those types of issues. They're seeing where their country's going. They might not support it. And I think a lot more young men showed up this year than they did in previous elections because of, the general anxiety amongst the young male, population in America right now. So I think that's what's happening. You're dealing with a generation of Zoomers that's very, very different than the millennial generation in terms of their political leanings. And I don't think the Democratic Party did a good enough job, motivating young women solely based on the abortion issue to come out and vote. I think there were certainly a number of other issues that they could have used to get young women out to the polls. They did not do that. They decided to focus solely on abortion, and it clearly did not work to their life.
I think Joe Rogan had something to do with it, and other podcasters. And it wasn't just Joe Rogan. There was just a whole bunch of podcasters appealing to young people that we're given a lot of credit anyway for getting the young vote out. Certainly during the victory speech, Trump introduced Dana White, who helped in that regard too, get out young men to vote. And Elon Musk also doing a podcast with Joe Rogan, was overtly appealing to young men to get out and vote. So I think that had an impact. And then also sports. I think the sports thing, young men tend to follow sports more than most. And I think the men and girls sports thing probably had an impact as well.
Well, I mean, you saw Democrats kind of play that usual playbook. They went like full on culture. It was all the celebrities that they sort of trotted out like they do every single 4 years in their strategy, whereas Trump and Republicans went more counterculture, to your point, Don. And I certainly, listen, we all know it. I'm going to learn it with my 8-month-old who's upstairs giving my wife all sorts of problems today. Every kid wants to rebel. So if you tell them you're supposed to do X, they're going to want to go the other direction. I think Trump leaning into that counterculture angle actually worked pretty well. Dennis, what are your thoughts?
No, I mean, exactly what you just said as talking as a parent. The Democrats are talking down to people, right? People are getting sick of being talked down to and being told what to do. And during the COVID lockdowns where we're at today, that kind of, they had their first chance, a lot of these kids. I'm voting against. I'm done with this, right? So, I mean, that also goes back to the previous conversation about Latino voters, minority voters. Again, you have your next few points you're going to talk about here. The Democrats have gone farther left. They talk down to everybody. They look down at everyday Americans. They don't know how to speak to middle America. And the liberal media is done everything they can to help the Democrats in their efforts this last cycle. I think more than ever, and I know we'll get to that point, but man, they doubled down more than ever. Like they helped push a narrative that helped us. Right. So now that's where we have to now captivate is how do we talk about middle America? How do we not talk down everybody and tell them what to do? Right. How do we bring them into the tent, so to speak, and work with them? And I know, again, we got other points on this thing later where we'll have talk about bringing people.
Yeah, it's a good transition. Let's use that. Appreciate that, Dennis. I could take a break. You got my job for me. I love it. Let's get into the why. Why did this happen? First, I want to talk about, before we get into the things Dennis mentioned, next thing on our agenda is just what happened in Illinois. We saw this nationwide as well, that there was a more willingness from those people center right to vote early. Did they vote by mail? Not as much, because conservatives aren't overly trusting of that process, but they certainly seem willing to vote early in person. The numbers aren't officially 100% final yet, but what we're seeing is almost 19% of voters in Illinois voted by mail this year. Almost 35% voted early in person. Both of those are the highest since the COVID year in 2020. And actually, the early vote numbers are the highest ever. That's significant. And I know, Don, the party did a Bank Your Vote program, put a lot of effort into that. It was one of the main things you guys focused on during your tenure. We're seeing that in the results here, that over half the people who voted in this election voted before Election Day, which other than 2020, that's never happened before.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously had the Bank Your Vote Gala in February. I think it was the largest fundraiser for the Republican Party in recent history. And we used about $350,000 of that money to do our GOTV effort, and we preached for like 12 months, bank your vote, which later was changed to swamp your vote by Trump. Same concept.
Well, sometime offline, I want to ask you why that changed. Bank your vote was so much better, but whatever.
I liked it. That was a Ron McDaniel thing, and I guess after Laura came in, they decided they needed to change that trademark. It was a Trump thing. It was a Trump change too. It wasn't the RNC changing it. But whether you call it that or just early voting, we pounded on people. about why it's a lot. You save us money to vote early. And so here in Sangamon County, we certainly experienced a lot of that. And I just went to a lunch today, and Don Gray was even talking about preaching how he's our county clerk, Republican county clerk, how much money you hard Republicans. And he said the hard Republicans voted early in record numbers here in Sangamon County as well, just like you said, nationally. So I like to think that had some of the impact, the combination of preaching that for a long time, and then also putting the money that we had into the effort to encourage people to do that digitally and by mail and through texting.
We did much better with the early vote, right? But some of the early numbers, and I can't wait to see how everything kind of plays out, is our vote by mail was still not very good. And there's evident in some of these races where in some of these open house seats, we were competing as we were tracking as things were going, but we didn't know how bad it was going to be till that vote by mail dump happened, right? When that vote by mail dump happened, you're like, oh boy, like that, we just got crushed. Let's be honest here. We are still absolutely getting crushed in the vote by mail game. Looking for those low propensity voters is something that we need to continue to get better at. And I encourage people that during these municipal elections, hey, let's keep honing our skills and sharpening and figuring out how to do this and going after those and getting better at our vote by mail program. We can't be doing well on early vote, in some cases winning and then winning the day of, but then still losing by 10% in vote by mail.
Well, in some cases, it's even more than 10.
It's something, yeah.
And so here's one thing I'd say, just to clarify for those people who are watching this. There's actually two different things that we're talking about right now. You need to make sure, especially as a party, the party needs to make sure that they get Republicans out. And so whether it's high propensity, mid propensity, low propensity, the party's job is turnout and getting their people to the polls. And that's going to be that bank your vote program. Get it in, get that vote in and vote early. So that's one thing we're talking about. What Dennis is talking about is something we still don't do very well as a party that we've got to work on, especially, but this is usually driven by candidates because the party can't do this as much, which is go out there, earn votes at a doorstep, and then lock that vote in. Knock on the door of a persuadable voter, get them to vote for you, and then hand them the application and say, here we go. We're going to vote. You used to fill this out. I'm going to get it in. I'll be back in 2 weeks when your ballot arrives. Let's make sure you fill it out the right way. Got to be careful about that. But it's that ballot harvesting. It's that, getting those persuadable voters, swing voters to go vote Republican and lock them in before Democrats go drop $1 million in TV ads and possibly change their minds about us before Election Day. So there are two different things here. And what we did see was a lot of improvement with getting Republicans to the polls, and that's what the party's job is. So kudos to the party for doing that. But to Dennis's point, please don't think that that's number one, the whole job, because there's a whole half of the other part of the job that we got to get better at. And with a gubernatorial candidate and 7 statewide candidates on the ballot in 26, this is our opportunity to get better at that other half of the equation, because that's where you can actually start to change election results when you bank those persuadable votes at the doorstep. So I just want to make sure I make it clear to the voter, to the people watching, there are two different things we're kind of talking about.
I'd say it's actually
I don't want to make sure that people understand. I'm not slamming the whole. We did very well on something we weren't doing well at, so we've improved, and that's because of the things that we're putting in place. Now we just have to get better at this portion, and I believe we can, but it's harder, right? It's a lot more into the weeds as you're trying to separate and explain to everybody how this works. And I think if we pick certain places to improve those, like what they be other house races, and now we take that initiative, we make it a county-wide initiative in some counties where you hone in on those skills, right? And we help those candidates out. I believe we'll be successful. Is it going to take a while? Absolutely. But the more we go through the process, the easier it's going to be able to teach others how to do it.
Yeah,
well, we saw California won some congressional races in 22 because of doing this kind of a vote by mail program. Then it all fell apart in 24. And wouldn't you know it, they lost almost all those seats that they had picked up. And so it shows just how important this is. Don, you've been
It's three different things, really. It's like preaching the party faithful to get out there, the hard R's to get out there and vote. And, we have existing platforms to do that. Then secondly, it's getting the mid and low propensity voters out there. And that's what we did with our program, with the texting, mailing, and the digital. And, for 350,000, you can make an impact. We think we brought in 77,000 more voters through that program in this particular election. But then what you're talking about is the third and most effective way, and that's ballot harvesting, door-to-door ballot harvesting. And that takes tremendous resources. So it's really a resourcing. I mean, the second part, the texting, mailing, and digital, that takes a lot of resources too. I've heard that estimated that Pritzker spent in 2022 $20 million on GOTV. Well, you can do a lot of ballot harvesting for $20 million.
Well, I think the key is, though, down to your point, it's the third thing takes labor. The third thing takes labor. To ballot harvest, to do that work takes labor, and it takes bodies. And that's where we've struggled with our grassroots being so fractured. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit in the podcast. We tend to like to sort of burn ourselves down when it comes to the grassroots instead of working together. To do ballot harvesting, you really can't pay for that. I mean, you can have all the money in the world, but at a certain point, if there's nobody to give the money to go knock on the doors, the money's kind of useless. It takes bodies, it takes labor, and that's where we have struggled a bit as a party. And that's where we're going to move into.
About labor. We could have a podcast just talking about that later on in regards to field ops, right?
Here's my question. Here's my question. What happened to precinct committeemen? How many precinct committeemen are in this entire state? The job of a precinct committeeman is a 40-hour-a-year commitment.
It's not a 40-hour. It's more than that.
Well, if not more. Okay, you just said 40 hours a year, knocking your precinct doing ballot harvesting. If you're a precinct committeeman, you should be doing at least that. We can't get some precinct committeemen to even knock one door in their precinct. That's, I think, the biggest problem. We have free labor across this entire state right now. Elected precinct committeemen.
I tell you what happened to him is Rutan patronage. Used to be a lot of the PCs. They had jobs, or they were able to get jobs for people, and
the good old George Ryan days.
and that's gone. And so my understanding is that the piece. The Dems are struggling with PCs just like we are. The difference is they have labor out there knocking on doors.
Yeah, right. True. Travis,
well, if I could just piggyback the PC thing, I'm so glad you brought it up, because to me, that's how we win, right? We're not going to have a billionaire governor that's going to write millions of dollars of checks for us, right? That was around our days. Times were good for a while on resources. That's not where we're at anymore. It's going to take hard work. The good news is the hard work is part of the Republican Party platform. If I could just plug Peoria County real quick, I'm so proud of my dad, our Peoria County Chair, Chuck Weaver, came in, and that's what we're working on, right? Before he came in, we had 40 PCs. Now we're up to 100 PCs. And it's a huge benefit, because when you have a 2.5x times on your PC workers, now you've got people in all these neighborhoods that they can knock doors. Of course, that's the hard work. But we also have these people's phone numbers. If you can send out 100 text messages, that's pretty easy. That's step one. Hi, I'm Travis Weaver. I'm your local precinct committeeman. Just wanted to see if you needed any help getting to the polls. Just wanted to see if you needed any help getting registered. Just wanted to see if you wanted to step up and volunteer a little bit. PCs are free. They've typically been underpaid and underthanked. We can't pay them, but we can thank them, and we can promote them. And we can help them feel special. And the more that we can get these PCs engaged to go out and do the work, the better position we're going to be in. Because to me, the PC is the antidote to getting outspent 16-1.
Michael, get the final word here, and then we'll go to the next topic.
I mean, I think we talked about it a little earlier. There were 2.4 million people in this state that voted for Trump. And we have to identify, each of these parties, the county GOPs throughout the state, need to identify those people that showed up in 2024 that did not show up in 2022. You turn out, some of those folks, that can sway a race. I mean, there's 15,000 people in St. Clair County that voted for President Trump in 2024 that did not vote in 2022. If we get 8,000 of those 15,000 to show up in a midterm election year, we win every countywide race. So the voters are out there. It's just making sure that they have a plan to vote and they get it done.
Yeah, I mean, we're all here's the problem. If I were to write this up, each of us was talking about something different. We were on the same topic, but we were all on, okay, we do this and this and this. And that's where we end up getting so confused as a party, because we just sort of do this and end up chasing our tail. So we're going to have to have a more clear plan than what we just presented on the podcast. Yeah. But it was good analysis, and I appreciate it. Let's get a little more into the why here. We're running a little bit low on time, but there's a few why topics that we need to talk about, especially Dennis has already kind of brought up some of these things we wanted to cover. So we got to make sure we get into them. first things first is Democrats have moved really far left on social issues, on cultural issues, and left the average voter behind. Lane is going to bring up in post two different tweets from Ian Bremmer that I flagged a while ago. Actually, at this point, sheesh, almost 3 weeks ago. But the first one here is that he'll show is since 2008 on a couple key issues, affirmative action and immigration, you see the massive shift towards the left amongst Democrats, whereas the median voter hasn't really changed where they are, and the Republican voter hasn't really changed much where they are, moving a little bit left and right based on the year. But you just see the massive movement amongst Democrats as they went far left on these issues. I can show you screenshot after screenshot after screenshot on various issues where we've seen this. Bringing a little more funny version of this up on screen, Lane will do this next one on progressive, where you see in 2008 where the center's here and liberals here, conservatives there, and then 2012 liberal moves further, and then 2021 liberals way over here, way off the screen basically, and basically calling everybody bigots. And of course everyone in the center is like, well, I guess I'm more on the right now, I'm more on the conservative side. But you see this on issue after issue. We see it in Illinois. Heck, Cook County with Kim Foxx leaving office and Eileen O'Neill Burke coming in, and suddenly it's like, hey, you know what? We're actually going to prosecute criminals. I mean, it was such a surprise to people. Under Kim Foxx, you had to have 10 convictions for retail theft or steal over $1,000 before they would ever approve felony charges against you. It's ridiculous. Eileen O'Neill Burke changed that to $300 or one conviction, which is a bit more reasonable. You're seeing this far left movement amongst Democrats, and we see it a lot in Illinois, and they're leaving the average voters behind. And I'm curious what you guys think about that.
I think one of the biggest reasons why the Democratic Party has shifted so far to the left, at least in the state of Illinois, but in general, is because up until now, there really hasn't been any repercussion for them moving this far to the left on a number of these issues. Is that when was the last time a Democratic member of Congress lost specifically on an issue that they were too liberal on, that you were too far to the left on abortion, you were too far to the left on all these other issues? And it got them bold to keep moving further and further to the left because nobody was stopping them. Right now in the state of Illinois, they're trying to pass a bill that's going to legalize assisted suicide in the state of Illinois. Because, why not if you're the Democratic Party? Or is the Democratic Party going to lose votes because they legalize, assisted suicide in this state? I think they should. I think they can. But is there anything that's actually going to be done about that if the Democrats out in Springfield decide, hey, I'm going to vote to let people just kill grandma? That's the big problem going on in the state right now, is that there aren't enough repercussions for Democrats who are moving further and further to the left on these social issues.
Yeah, they certainly feel emboldened. We've seen it over and over. The more they win re-election and they say, okay, great, that was fine. Let me just take it even further, which, as we've talked about for the last year and a half on this podcast, has created opportunity after opportunity for Republicans. Heck, Brandon Johnson on a daily basis gives us opportunities to show just how ridiculous and extreme and unable to govern the Democratic Party has become. And that just keeps happening more and more. It's incumbent on us to point that out. And we've seen it. I'll even give the Republican Party, the state party, kudos over the last couple of years. They've really gotten a lot better than they used to be, just calling these things out, putting out press releases and tweets and social media posts and trying to get some media coverage and some attention to some of these things. We had seen none of that prior to the last few years. So you're seeing some movement on this. We have work to do. We don't do it nearly enough, but I will give kudos where it's due. There has been improvement.
I just hope they keep going lefty, because it's only going to help us.
Yeah,
with all demographics.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I go back to that that op-ed from Peterson, just because I thought this was crazy. I pulled this part out for this section. So again, reminding you, this is a Hispanic, gay, he had a couple other titles in there that you wouldn't expect to be conservative or Republican. And yet, because he's voting for Donald Trump, he had so many people calling him racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, and every other ist and ick that he's been called. Wait a second, him? You can't call him those things. But he, half of America, they're sick of, he said this, I'm sick of the self-righteous and label-obsessed left alienating us over differing opinions. A lot of Americans are just sort of sick of everything has to be political. You can't watch a sporting event or a movie or anything else without, it being political and you being called you're racist or sexist if you don't like the fact that Star Wars is now, just a whole bunch of space lesbians. I mean, it's just, there's a reason why people loved Top Gun 2 and went and watched it and spent a ton of money on it because it was just fun entertainment and we weren't preached at for an hour and a half. I think I broke everybody with space lesbians.
That was a good one, Collin. Yeah, and I think it's kind of TBD where the state Democrat Party is going to go. You've heard several members of the Illinois Senate across the aisle saying, we need to take this election seriously. The voters spoke. We got to rethink some of our issues. And then you get somebody like Edgar Gonzalez, Democrat state rep, saying the reason that they didn't do well in Illinois in 2024 is because they weren't far enough left. So I think that debate is still to happen across the aisle. We'll see how it shakes out. My hope would be that there could be a voice of reason that comes out ahead. The reality, though, is that the progressive wing of that caucus has so much control that I do think that it'll be continue to see more steps to the left. And in 2025, does that look like revenue enhancements because the governor can't figure out how to make cuts in a $54 billion budget? I mean, $54 billion, you're telling me you can't find areas that are not when
it was 40 billion when he took office, by the way. Yeah,
I think it was 38 actually.
There you go.
But yeah, huge increase over a very short period of time, and it's only getting worse.
Maybe he'll give a call to Elon.
There you go. I mean, listen, every time I see Delio Ramirez speak out about the future of the Democratic Party, I'm like, could we please put more microphones in her face? I mean, it's just, they are having this existential crisis because you see it. Even Pritzker publicly after the election, he was like, maybe we got to look at what Trump does because it clearly is kind of popular. I mean, they are trying to figure this out. But to your point, Travis, you're right, that there is a pull to the left in this party and the Democratic Party, and it keeps taking them further and further left, and it's taking them further and further away from your average voter. I've got plenty of friends who considered themselves Democrats a decade ago, and 4 or 5 years ago, they were, they didn't know if they had a party, and now they're like, well, I guess we're more with you because you're less nuts than they are. And, I wish we could have them be for us because they really like us, and that's what I'm working on. But
that'll never happen. That'll never happen.
Well, I think some of this too is going to be driven by how Pritzker reads the results, because obviously he wants to run for president. That's something that, he has made blatantly obvious. And is he going to try to run up the score on some of these liberal issues because he thinks that's going to help him in a presidential primary? And we'll see, what direction he takes them. But obviously, he's kind of the top dog over there, especially with the bank account that he's got.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's go to the next one. This one could be fun to talk about. And I've wanted to cover this for a while. We just haven't had an excuse. But 2 things I want to talk about here and open this up. When we talk about how, as Dennis said, that Democrats preach at and look down on everyday Americans, there was a story that I flagged, an article that I flagged, I think it was Politico, about a focus group in Pennsylvania leading up to the election. And I've talked about this at a few events. I don't think I've covered it on an SFR yet, where they asked people to describe Trump and Harris with one word. And the word that came up from several people for Trump was crazy. And then for Harris was preachy. And they said, okay, well, which one would you vote for? And one lady's like, well, I guess I'd pick Trump because crazy doesn't look down on me and preachy does. And I think this is something my wife and I have talked about a lot since 2016, which is that as the left and the media and Democrats, as they speak down to and talk down to everyday Americans, they've created Donald Trump. I mean, this environment we're in right now was created by so much of America being sick and tired of being told that they're sexist or racist or misogynist or all the other ists and icks that we're constantly called. And people are sick of it. You even saw Rahm Emanuel say recently in an interview at an event, I'll read the quote. We talk like we're adjunct professors at a small liberal arts college in the Midwest. The Democratic Party became a house of mirrors. We just want to feel good about ourselves, talking to ourselves about ourselves. And I think it's absolutely true. Just as a party, they are these sort of educators who are smarter than everybody else. They know better than everybody else. And you have seen a bit of a revolt amongst average Americans because of that they really are. I mean, no one likes the smartest kid in class. And honestly, the Democratic Party has become the party of the wealthy elites. And you're seeing it play out in the way that they approach voters. And it's not necessarily their issues themselves. It's how they present the issues to the public that, frankly, is becoming rejected more and more. What do you guys think?
I thought the comments from Rahm Emanuel were spot on. And I think that's a big part of the reason why the Democrats are having the problems that they are, is that, in a lot of these issues, it's, well, you're either 100% in lockstep with the Democratic Party or you're a bigot or you're a racist, and people don't like that. The average voter, I mean, you're not going to be, nobody is going to be in line with the Democrats on every issue, just like nobody's in line with the Republicans on every single issue. And you shouldn't, say, oh, well, you're either with me 100% of the time or you're a bad person. And you saw that with, Hillary Clinton and Biden and, the comments that they made about not just Trump, but about people that supported him. Oh, you're a deplorable. Oh, you're garbage. That's not, you're trying to win votes here, right? I think that's the goal.
Well, you're uneducated and clinging to your guns and religion.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. That's proven. Some of us older folks remember some quotes from even before the last couple of years. I like that.
Speaking of quotes,
it's true.
Carville is the best quote. He's funny too at the same time. He doesn't call it identity politics. He calls it identitarian politics, which he said is the stupidest idea except for defund the police, which is an even stupider idea.
Yeah, you've seen it. This is not a new phenomenon with the Democrats, but it's just, again, as they've become, you've seen this change. Don said it really well earlier. As Republicans have become the party of working class and middle income voters, medium to lower educated voters, and Democrats have become this sort of the party more of the wealthy and of the elite. You're seeing this change, and what Chris and I have talked about a lot is the improvement in how we speak as a party. As we've come to this realization over the last few years that the fact that we're the party of working families is a good thing. And, that change that Trump has done to this party is a very good thing. And it took us a while to embrace it and accept it. But the fact that we stand for the majority of Americans, we got to stop being ashamed of that fact. Democrats stand for, the one person in the back of the room, but the other 200 people in the room also deserve representation. And we've been made to feel guilty for the fact that we stand for those 200 people. I think it's about time we stop feeling guilty for that fact that we represent. That's what a democracy, or in our case, a republic is supposed to be, that you're supposed to stand for a majority of the people. And yet, for whatever reason, we've been made to feel ashamed for the fact that we stand for most of America.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see in the last election where the R's made stride versus where the D's made strides. We made big gains in the working class and minority communities. They made small gains in the white college-educated elites. And part of me just says, honestly, take them. Because if you're going to keep pushing on these climate issues and LGBTQ issues, the working class is going to continue to come more our way. I used to own a handful of rental properties, and I had quite a few lower-income minority tenants. And when we would do things like pass CEJA, now their energy bills have doubled. And so the party that they had elected to represent them is doubling their energy bill. So a family that used to have $100 left at the end of the month to go out for dinner or to buy something for their kids, now that's gone because the Democrats are trying to power our energy grid with unicorn whispers. That doesn't make any sense. And then you think about these people that want to give their kids a better future, want them to go to school and actually learn STEM, learn math and science. And instead we're teaching third graders about masturbation and kindergartners about the 58 different genders. So these things that the white, wealthy, suburban class is pushing, this is part of the Democrat Party, is forgetting the old part of the Democrat Party that's like, I want clean, I want affordable power, I want my kids to learn. And so the more that this coalition of theirs is breaking, the more that it benefits us.
Yeah, totally. You see under CEJA, you mentioned it. We just saw with Lion Electric. The Governor Pritzker get his press pops and his, oh, this is all great as we make these moves. But the reality is, these green jobs we've been promised certainly aren't showing up. Meanwhile, our energy rates are skyrocketing, and people are paying the price for the fact that now we have to import our energy from dirty energy producing states. It's just, you get the press pop, you get the press conference, and then of course they know that none of these reporters are going to follow up later. So, we got to do that big press conference with Lion Electric about how great this is that we're going to have school buses that are all electric. Where's the follow-up now that, hey, Pritzker, you did this big press conference and now it's not going to happen. So, is that your fault or not? Are you going to do something about it? But no, he's moved on to the next thing, and so is the press.
Yeah, that's exactly
like Belvedere, by the way, that plant's still not open, but nobody said, hey, Pritzker, you got all this credit for reopening the plant and it's not open now. So does he now get the blame for the fact that it isn't open?
Whenever I hear people talk about clean energy jobs, I always say, do me a favor, drive past a wind farm and show me where the parking lot is. Because people park in parking lots when they go to work. And you drive past a wind farm, there's not a parking lot there. It's a one-time hit of people that typically come in from out of state, do the job, and then leave. You drive past a coal plant, there's a parking lot. You drive past a wind farm, There's not a parking lot. There's not jobs that are associated with that. There's a handful of people that are sitting in a control room watching it, but there's not clean energy jobs like there are for our traditional energy sources. There's not a parking lot.
Yeah, fair. Let me take us to the next topic here, just because we are starting to run out of time. But this is one I've wanted to speak about for the ever since Election Day, because there's something I'm curious what you guys have noticed about this as well. That here in Illinois, as you see Democrats kind of go through this postpartum, sheesh, you can tell my wife just had a kid. We go through this analysis of what just happened post mortem. You see the Democrats are like, oh yeah, we need to talk about cost of living, and we need to reach to everyday Americans, and then they immediately go to, but we are doing that because look, we raised the minimum wage. You just saw that St. Louis's NPR, Jay Hoffman and Bill Enyart were like, yeah, Democrats are doing a great thing for the middle income Americans and everyday Americans because we raised the minimum wage. And it just keeps reminding me how Democrats actually don't know how to speak to middle income Americans because they've spent so much time on equity that they think raising the minimum wage is helping middle income Americans. But the minimum wage is the minimum wage. That's lower income by definition. And so when the only thing you can go to and Google it, I've seen 7 or 8 references by Democrats about how great they are helping the middle class in Illinois because they raised the minimum wage. Like, no, guys, those don't connect. But Democrats obviously have no idea how to speak to middle income families and working families in this state if the only thing they really can go to is the minimum wage that they raise, that's how they helped middle income families. And so it's really become clear to me that in Illinois especially, I don't think Democrats know what to say to working families or middle income families. I think they genuinely have no idea what to say to them.
I think the Democratic, post-mortem of the election, I mean, it makes a little bit of sense because the Democrats under the Biden administration, nobody on this podcast wants to hear this, of course, but the Democrats under the Biden administration did do some nice things for middle-income voters, for the working class and all those things. They just didn't run on any of those things. They just ran on abortion and, Trump bad and all those sorts of things. They didn't really talk about, stuff that was in the infrastructure bill, that actually created jobs in this country. They didn't talk about anything that might have actually helped middle-income Americans that the Biden administration may or may not have done. And you might not believe those things happen. That's fine. But if you're a Democrat and you believe that you actually did good things over the past 4 years, you didn't run on any of those things. You just ran on stupid things.
I thought you got cut off, Chris, but it was a very abrupt end to your point.
No.
I mean, have you guys seen this too? I mean, this as they give these quotes about how they're standing up for working families. Then because we did X, they don't really have anything to fill that X with. And as you said, Travis, because really that X is they've raised taxes. Whether it's the constant increases within the gas tax, it's the income taxes where they for multiple years actually raised income taxes on everyday families. Though this last year they decided to not actually to index it to inflation. You've seen it all across the board as they raise taxes on small businesses, as they raise taxes everywhere they possibly can. This is not a party that actually does stand for working families. And so when they're asked to speak about it, they kind of struggle and they go back to, again, minimum wage, which is the minimum. That's not working class.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. They are an anti-small business party and almost an anti-working family party. But I think part of the problem is that their agenda is so crowded, they don't have time to talk about economic issues. I mean, they have this climate religion that they continually promote. They open borders, transgender issues, all kinds of abortion. There's just not room in the agenda for talking about the thing that matters the most in this election anyway, was the economy.
Well, and you saw the Republicans do very well, especially Senate Republicans on this, talking about how Pritzker and the Democrats are spending so much money on migrants and non-citizens, and that resonated with voters. And again, that's working class voters. There was a recent poll done in the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago, mind you, not Peoria or Palatine or, somewhere down in Chris's region in Southern Cook. This is Chicago. 51% of Chicagoans said that the city is spending too much on providing social services and housing for migrants. Only 20% said they were spending too little. And the split was even bigger amongst blacks, 62-14. Hispanics was 56-17. I mean, this is, again, a great talking point the Republicans did very well on in 2024 about how Democrats seem to find the money to help non-citizens. But where are they when lower income communities need help, or middle income families need help with the cost of healthcare or the cost of energy or the cost of groceries? Where are they on those things? And yet they found what, $1.6 billion to help non-citizens. That narrative clearly worked with voters. If it worked so well in the city of Chicago, which is obviously fairly heavily leaning towards liberal issues typically.
Because they're not the party of growing the economy, they're the party of redistribution.
Yeah, and I would remind you, Collin, that a happy warrior is still a warrior. And I'm not positive what he meant by that, but what I think he meant by that is that people can continue to come here illegally and commit crimes and they're not leaving, and then they'll continue to get free subsidized health care. So if that's where he's going to plant his flag on the ground, by all means, Mr. Governor, continue to be that warrior, because to your point, even if in the city of Chicago it's not a popular issue, you can guarantee that it's not going to be a popular issue in the collars, and it sure as heck isn't going to be a popular issue downstate. So please, JB, continue to fight that fight. We'll gladly take the other side of that issue every day.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. All right, last thing on this is we kind of hinted at it a little bit ago. There was an interesting article in the Washington Post, Democrat, who talked about how the liberal media bias is actually hurting Democrats. Really, the central point, since we're low on time, I don't want to spend too much time here, but the central point of it was that this diminishing trust the public has in the media is the result of Democrats just being, or Democrats, the media, just being so in bed with the Democratic Party and the far left positions on pretty much everything. And it's reached a point where the public has just said, fine, well, then we just don't trust you at all. And so the central point here was if Democrats had maybe kept the media not being quite so in bed with them and on their side, that maybe the media could have been a better ally to them. But at this point, because the media has just made it so clear that they are essentially the PR arm of the Democratic Party, the public has just lost all trust in the media at this point. And so now that advantage that they've had for a very long time just doesn't carry as much as it used to. Curious if you guys think that there's some accuracy to that or what you've seen.
There was one quote in here that I really liked where the reporters or the opinion writer said that reporters treat Republicans like a crime beat and Democrats like friends in need. And I think that says it all. I mean, you see how they treat Republicans, not just President Trump, but even, congressmen and senators and governors. They're very critical of us. And then when a bad story comes up on a Democrat, they try to kind of explain it away or, oh, there's nuance here. And I think a lot of people have caught on, especially over the course of the last 8 years, that, okay, the media really can't be trusted. Like a lot of these reporters and news organizations are going to bat for the Democrats. You read these fact checks and how the hoops they jump through to say that what we're saying is, false or pants on fire. And then the Democrats, oh, it's mostly true, I think it's run its course.
Yeah, I think they've lost a lot of credibility, but I still don't see that is hurting. Having 95% of the media on your side, I don't see how that is really hurting Democrats overall. It's just, I think they're less effective than they ever were.
Yeah, it's a good clarification. Yeah, well, it's a good clarifying point. I mean, it certainly still is an asset they have on their side. But I remember early on, when I started doing politics 20 years ago, just how much influence the media had and as it came to elections. And those days are well past.
Yeah, media endorsements mattered then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people...
We would rush to get the sign toppers to put them on our signs if we got the endorsement. We'd change all of our ads, all of our mailings. We have to go back to production to add them on. And now it's like, the mailer's already at print. Just let it go. It doesn't matter.
I think a lot of people are gravitating towards alternative sources. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's been.
Look at these podcasters. I mean, Don brought up Joe Rogan and these podcasters. I mean, as you sort of realize that you're not necessarily getting a fair and balanced representation from the media, you're forced to go look for that information elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I want to move us to some of our specific topics. We've done a pretty good job covering what we need to do in order to win in 2026. And if I jump us into that, we're going to have to close the episode down right after. So I really want to move up to the next couple topics here, especially this one, just because it's really blown up. So I'm going to quickly, I got to introduce our segment here. Give me 1 second.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
So, reason why we're going to play that is we're on our boy that escalated quickly segment here of Palatine Township. So, I honestly don't know how I feel about this, and I'm hopeful that you all can help me make up my mind because there are a lot of good positions or good thoughts in favor of what happened, and then a lot of good thoughts against what happened. And I don't know where the balance is falling here, but let me give the quick brief intro, which is Palatine Township Republican Committeeman Aaron Delmar, who is also the Highway Commissioner, has put together a bipartisan slate to run in Palatine Township because township elections are partisan in Illinois. At least most of them are. And so what they've done is they've taken 2 Democrats and put them on their slate. So it's 6 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I know they like to say one's an independent, one's a Democrat, but we've looked at the voting history. They're both Democrats. It's 6-2. And their thought is that as the township has gone more and more blue, this deal that they've made has ensured that they lock in those 6 so they're not going to lose any more seats. I'm sure you guys may have some thoughts on this. I have a lot, but I just want to shut up and just see, just off broad strokes, what you guys think about this. Because there's, Jeannie Ives and a bunch of others have gotten very angry about it and come after Delmar, including some of the blogs that just love to rip on Republicans. They've jumped on this. Obviously, Aaron and some others have defended the practice. Again, I think there's a lot of good arguments on both sides with them, which I'm happy to share. But first, curious what you guys think just on the front end of what happened and if you think it's a good idea or a bad idea.
Well, it's Jeannie Ives has called for Aaron's resignation from Republican leadership. And Tom Morrison has also joined in that call. I really don't know whether what that was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do for the Palatine Republican organization. But I do think, and I think that's very debatable. Good arguments on both sides, like you just suggested, Collin. But I do think it's kind of a bad look for Aaron because he is Republican leader. He's co-chair. Kathy Salvi's co-chair on the state central committee, Palatine committee man. There's he's a highway commissioner. I think this helps him with his paid job that he has. We know, Aaron has, kind of a reputation for, how shall I say this? Let's say he's good at self-promotion. And so that leads to a narrative that he's, more interested in serving himself than the public. And I think some people that would oppose Aaron can use this situation to support that narrative. So I just think this is a situation where Aaron would have been better served if he had stayed out of the spotlight on it.
Look, I think this is genius. I think this is genius for a number of reasons, and I'm taking Aaron's side in this. So, for example, everybody for the last, ever since I started being involved in Republican politics has this, image in their mind that Palatine is some Democratic stronghold, ruby head rock bed of the elephant.
Chris,
no,
just 1 second. You said Democrat, you meant Republican, I think.
Right. This Republican stronghold that's like a rock bed of the Republican Party. It's not. Trump this year had lost Palatine Township by just under 18 points. That's 18 points. Bailey lost it by over 20 points in 2022. The last Republican to win Palatine Township was Pat O'Brien in 2020. But any Republican would have beaten Kim Foxx in Palatine Township. I have running for state's attorney would have beaten Kim Foxx in Palatine Township. The last person before O'Brien was Munger in 2016. Every other Republican across every ballot line in an even year election has lost Palatine Township. And so I think I'm surprised the Democrats didn't ask for more than 2 trustees. If I'm the Democratic committee woman, I'm looking at these election results. I'm saying, I can get the assessor's spot out of this. I can get the clerk out of these election results. I'm surprised they didn't ask for more. This is the same situation that exists in dozens of townships across the state of Illinois because there's a recognition that the township is a service-orientated system of government where you're running a food pantry, you're driving senior citizens to the doctor's office, and you're plowing snow. So maybe it's a good idea for everybody to come together in a township, sing Kumbaya in this one aspect of government and politics so that we don't have to tear each other apart in order to determine who gets to count the cans of food at the food pantry. I thought this is a genius idea considering the election results that Aaron does not have to run a competitive race, which he would be the underdog in based on the election results. So, yeah, if the Democrats want 2 trustee spots on Palatine Township and they won't run a slate against you, I think that's a great idea.
Dennis, you were starting to say something earlier. I don't know if you still have thoughts that you wanted to share.
At the end of the day, this isn't anything new. Whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in all these townships, deals like this have been cut since I've been involved. I mean, does it make it right or wrong? All I'm saying is this is just being magnified because it's Aaron Del Mar.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's obviously you've obviously got, I mean, the blog that's pushing this out, if you look through their articles, I don't think they've ever published anything negative about Democrats. It's literally just post after post after post attacking Republicans. And unfortunately, Jeannie and with her platforms have been doing a lot of the same things. So a lot of this is being blown out of proportion because you're right, Dennis. It happens a lot, especially in Cook County. But there's a spotlight, whether right or not, there's a spotlight. So it's certainly worth talking about.
Right or wrong, Republican or Democrat. Democrats have put Republicans on their slates. Republicans have put Democrats on their slates. But again, this one's just a special circumstance in regards to how it's being magnified and those individuals who want to use this. And some of it, you almost got to wonder, well, they just don't like Aaron, so they're just going to use this as that moment to, take this one as far as they can go. And I think in regards to some of the other bloggers out there, I don't think I've ever seen them run a campaign. So
true.
Easy to sit and point. Like to see you get in the field and do something yourself.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's you look at some of the facts here, some of the data. I mean, Chris isn't wrong. If you look at the data over the last decade, Palatine Township on average has gotten about 10% more Democrat in the way that they voted in even-yeared elections. And so there has been significant movement. Now, is that they just really hated Ronner and Trump and not permanent? Maybe they'll come back. It's possible. But all we have right now to look at is the election data. So some of the explanations I've heard in favor of this is the fact that, yes, it has moved more Democratic.
Has a trend been going there locally? The last couple of townships.
But here, that's what I was going to bring up, Dennis, is you see some of these townships, some of these areas where from the state on up, or even in the county on up, they vote Democrat, but locally they actually vote more conservative. We've seen that at the township level. You see that in Wheeling. You've seen that in Palatine, Barrington, even up into Lake Zurich, Lake Villa, down towards
We're uncontested, Collin. Those races are uncontested. We're winning.
Hold on, Chris. Hold on. Let me finish. You see this happen in some of those township partisan races, and then in the nonpartisan races, we see more fiscally conservative candidates winning in blue areas, from Waukegan to Springfield, from Joliet to Naperville. We saw that in 23, and the data from their last partisan election 4 years ago, Democrats did run a slate and Republicans won every seat by 7 points, even though they were losing in the even numbered years by double digits. So there is something to be said for the fact that at the local level, voters in Palatine Township, just like in some of these other areas, want fiscally responsible, yes, Republicans to lead them at the local level, even if they vote Democrat for president or something else. And so I have heard from the other side of this that, listen, you won by 7 points last time around. You didn't need to give them 2 seats. You were going to win all 8 seats. Why give them 2? There is some credence to that position because, again, you won by 7 last time. It wasn't like you squeaked it out by half a point.
I don't see how you could look at trends and think that it would not be an even closer race in 2021. And even still, you have the majority on this board. You control all of the executive positions in the township. This is a win for the Republicans.
Chris, sorry, buddy. That's just wrong. In 2020, just before the 2021 election, Biden won Palatine Township by 21 points. Harris just won it by 18. So it's actually 3 points better for Republicans than it was 4 years ago. So that that point doesn't carry.
Okay,
but either
Collin,
way, where I think I'm falling here, I think Don and Chris has made some good points here. Where I think I'm falling here is that as at the township level, this maybe was worth thinking about. Now, would I have done it? I like to be a fighter. I don't like giving the Democrats any ground. So personally, hell no, I wouldn't have done this. Actually, Aaron's political and PR person, who he sends all his business to, she and I worked together on school board races and did this exact strategy back, I don't know, at this point, 8-10 years ago, but it was for nonpartisan and it was to knock off incumbents. It wasn't a situation where we already had all 8 seats, where we needed to give ground to the other side. So I know where this came from because I was involved in it and it worked. But just because you have one tool in your tool belt because you don't really know how to run campaigns doesn't mean you play that exact same play yet again. I don't know if I would have done done this, but I see some merits in at least pursuing it at the local level. But to Don's point, if you are the co-chair of the Republican Party and you want to run for governor, you got to make it through a Republican primary. You just gave your opponents a whole lot of ammunition to use against you in a Republican primary where the purity test is going to be important. Personally, everybody knows Aaron's a friend of my wife and mine. We haven't talked about this, but if we did, I would tell him I thought it was a pretty dumb idea just because of his own personal ambitions.
I'm going to shake his hand next time I see him, Collin.
There you go.
Shake his hand.
There you
He's
go.
a genius.
All right, let's move along here. What I want to finish on is we call them quick hits. We don't have a ton of time, so we do this fast, but we want to make sure we're equipping our audience with things that they can utilize as they're moving forward within their political organizations, their campaigns, if they're elected officials. There's things in the news you need to be aware of that you can use to help show how Republicans need to be elected in the state and need to lead in the state. We got a couple quick things we're gonna cover. Number one, and last time we talked about the PPP fraud in Illinois amongst state employees under Governor Pritzker. That number was 250 that the Office of the Executive Inspector General, or OEIG, had identified. Now, as of just a few weeks ago, the number is now over 275. So they're still finding even more Pritzker state employees who defrauded the PPP system, took away from a program that was intended to help keep people employed and help small businesses, and instead state employees found a way to enrich themselves instead. This is a culture of corruption in the Pritzker administration, and it's only getting worse. This is something people need to be talking more about, so we wanted to highlight it. Anybody briefly have any thoughts on the egregiousness of this?
Well, this follows the $2 billion, I think, unemployment comp fraud scam that they failed to catch. And I think they blamed that in part at the time on remote work. And from what I hear in Springfield is still, a lot of state employees have not returned to work. They're still working remotely. So possibly this is the result of Democrat lax management or mismanagement and remote work, too much remote work.
$7.2 million so far they've identified, and they're still finding more. So that's all money that should be going to money going to the taxpayers, but instead it's being wasted. And this is absolutely the kind of thing we've got to highlight. Next, unemployment in Illinois. Lane's going to bring up a thing on screen, a visual on screen. But if you look at the unemployment rates, the national rate's 4.1. Illinois is 5.3, the third highest in the whole country, as you can see with that graphic that Lane's going to be adding. So as you like to hear Pritzker tout how great the economy is in the state and how great Democratic leadership has been for working families in this state, it's important to remind voters that we have the third highest unemployment rate of any state in the entire country. Again, quick hits here, but anybody have any quick thoughts on that?
They may have said before, Illinois is, a great state if you're a big business, like a Chinese-owned company called Goshen, and got a green religious governor who wants to give you a bunch of money. It's good, but otherwise, the state government is pretty much anti-business, particularly for small businesses, and on top of that, we're losing population. We've lost population 10 years in a row. It's hard to grow a business if your population is declining.
Yeah, fair. Well, speaking of small business, go ahead, Travis.
Yeah, I think all this stuff around employment comes down to two different issues: overregulation and overtax. Obviously, we're overregulated. Our workers' comp is a total mess. Our permitting processes are total messes. And then you think about our taxes. As long as we have the nation's largest unfunded pension liability, we're going to continue to have high taxes. And so this big push where we're getting now for tier 2 pensioners that are trying to go back to tier 1, just remember, nobody wants to ask his public school teacher to work until he or she's age 67. I think that we can make some concessions, but to go back to tier 1 is just unconscionable. I mean, we did a really hard thing in 2011 to reduce these really juicy pension programs that we had. And until we get that pension under control, we're going to continue to have extremely high taxes, not just at the state level, but also the municipal level with our property taxes. So anytime you hear somebody talk about going back to tier 1 pension, just remember it's going to be more taxes, and we're going to continue to have elevated unemployment rates.
And on the work comp point, Illinois work comp rates for truckers is $17.50 per hundred. In Indiana, it's $3.50 per hundred.
Sheesh. I didn't know that. Thanks for that. That's a juicy stat. Appreciate that. Don mentioned small businesses. So Lane's going to bring up another map on screen. This one I noticed, it just hit me. I was scrolling and I saw this. So kudos, good news that new U.S. business applications hit a high watermark in 2023. You saw a record high number of new business applications. But if you look at this map, look at the very center of it. Where's the only place in the whole map, the only place where it's basically just dead, where there's almost no new business applications compared to the rest. The only place you see that hole is Illinois. And you could say, yeah, it's the more rural areas, but we're not the only state that's rural. In all the other rural states, they're still seeing new businesses start up. But the only place you see that giant hole is in the state of Illinois. That's because of, as Travis just said, overregulation. You're seeing in the business-friendly, tax and regulatory-friendly environments, these other states, especially in the Southeast and the Mountain West, are seeing a lot of success with new business startups. But of course, you see that giant hole right there, right in Illinois. That's certainly not good for jobs, for working families, and for the future of the state. And if you're a legislator, that's revenue that the state's not collecting because new businesses aren't starting up. Anybody have thoughts, or have we already covered it? I know we're
I think same issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, shout out to Sangamon County. They're the one little dark green speck in the whole state of Illinois on business applications. So that's good for them.
There you go. We got a few
often been hiring lately.
There you go. There you go. All right, last thing. In this, I don't know if Travis is going to want to hear this or if he's going to want to cover his ears, because I know Travis likes to get things done because he's a governing leader. Something that I just want to suggest to because we got a lot of Republican legislators who watch the program, and I appreciate that. As Democrats have been looking at this massive budget deficit that doesn't exist, that, we're carnival barkers for having talked about the fact that this might exist, or doom grifters, as they start to come to grips with the fact that they need to cut, there was a memo put out by Pritzker to his agency saying, y'all need to start cutting your budgets. I'm summarizing because we're out of time, but y'all need to start to cut your budgets. We're going to have to make some cuts to programs. And they made a list of the types of programs and the agencies and where they're going to reduce costs and what they're going to cut back. And here's just what I want to say. To the Republicans down there, it's time we use the Democrat strategy against them. Every time they pass a budget and Republicans vote against it, you see TV ads and mailers about how we don't want rape kits for women who've been raped, and we don't like kids and seniors and special needs people, and we hate everybody. They use a strategy about how we voted against the budget, and it's about dang time we use the strategy against them. When they put this budget together, they are going to have to end COVID era programs. They're going to have to cut certain programs. And the fiscal conservative part of us is probably going to be happy that they do that. But the political part of us has got to make them own that. That when they vote for this budget, when they put this budget together, I want to see text messages and ads and mailings going to all these incumbent Democrat districts saying they hate seniors and they hate women and they hate babies and all the stuff they do to us, because it's about dang time we finally use that strategy against them. And I know, obviously, we need to make cuts to the budget. I understand there's a governing piece of this, but I'm the political hack here saying it's about damn time that we hold them to the same standard they hold us. And they're about to cut a whole bunch of popular programs because they have to. They have no other options. They can't raise enough taxes to fill this hole. They're also going to have to make some cuts. And we need to make them aware of that and actually finally start to use that strategy against them. So, anyways, I know, Travis, your job is to govern and to lead. So maybe politically that wouldn't necessarily be something you're going to want to endorse or support. But when it comes time to election season, it's time we start using these tactics in our favor. I don't know. Maybe you think I'm crazy, but what do you guys think?
Well, we saw some of that with the most.
Let's let Travis go first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I will be surprised if we see legitimate cuts happen. The governor has a stomach for a lot of things. I don't know that one of those is cutting budgets. If he could do it, he would have done it before, right? We started at $38 billion with them. Now we're up to 54. I've never seen him have an appetite to cut spending. Like I said, appetite for a lot of things. Cutting spending, not one of them. Maybe I'll be wrong in 2025. I'd love to see it. And if there are popular things that get cut, you're right. Accountability makes sense.
Michael, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we saw it with this most recent budget where there were vulnerable Democrat incumbents that voted no. And I think we need, they use that against us in all of our competitive races. And I think we need to start using that against them. Look at Katie Stewart. She voted no in the budget. So does that mean that she's against everything that's in there, just like they try to say about us?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, listen, we like to play things more honorably, and I respect that. But guess what? To Democrats, this is war. It's time we start understanding that. Every one of these Democrats who voted against the budget, why weren't we in their mailboxes for their voters saying that they voted against rape kits and all the stuff they come after us for? Is it BS when they do it to us? Yes, but you know what? They're doing it. It's working. The media's not calling them out on it, and it's time that we say, "Fine, you know what? You want to treat this like war? It's about time we show you what that could be like." Again, I'm the political hack here, so I'm not elected to any office. It's not my job to go govern and put a budget in place. It's my job to get Republicans elected. But I think it's about time we start using some of these tactics.
Maybe that's the way to get that attack to kind of go away. Like we attack the Democrats that vote no on the budget for, being against rape kits. The fake news media will come out with the fact check talking about how Republicans are just lying like we always do. And then maybe the Democrats will stop using it against us.
There you go. That's where I like see the
Good,
ray
good
of sunshine.
that one,
Michael
Michael.
Butler. All right, let's close this down. We've abused everybody's time way too much. As always, we close with a fun segment here, our OG and Clown of the Week nominations. We're having some fun with this. Everyone doesn't have to participate if you don't want to, but somebody in politics, ideally Illinois politics, but it could be anywhere, that you think deserves praise or maybe scorn for something they've done the last week or two. This is your chance to make a nomination here, put out a thought. What do you guys think?
I'll start. I'm not sure what the statute of limitations is, but for Clown of the Week, I've got to go with Joe Scarborough. I mean, this guy is just absolutely ruthless. The day before the election, Trump's Hitler. A couple of days after the election, he goes out in Mar-a-Lago and meets with him. I mean, how do you talk out of your mouth on both sides any more aggressively than on November 3rd, he's Hitler. On November 5th, well, we got to sit down and we got to talk to him and we got to see what we can do. I mean, do you sit down and have conversations with Hitler? I don't think so. So either he's a liar or he's a total narcissist. I think both.
Yeah, there you go. It's a worthy addition.
I know we always say Brandon Johnson on here, but I saw that he was speaking at a function earlier this week, and he said that people need to get on board with his agenda and join the in crowd. And it's like, well, your approval rating is 15%. So I don't think that's a very large in crowd. He did get a couple of claps and cheers from the audience. So I guess all 15% of his supporters were probably in attendance. Or at least most.
He also once again said, I'll be doggone if I give up this chance where voters wanted me to transform the city. It's like, yeah, no, you won by a couple percent against an old white, conservative candidate who was completely unlikable and didn't run a great campaign. But that's a mandate to completely transform the city of Chicago.
I'll nominate the legacy media because they just continue to lose credibility, and this election really, I don't know if it was a coup de grace, but it was a hard hit on them, particularly when you have people like the staff of the Washington Post, basically going into mourning and resigning because they couldn't write an endorsement for the political nominee. But it doesn't stop there at the Washington Post. I mean, 95% of the legacy media are Democrats, and they lost an election to someone they thought was Hitler, and they told people he was Hitler, and I just don't, their credibility has got to be low, certainly lower than lawyers. Right now, I think it's even lower than used car salesmen at this point.
It might even be lower than political consultants. I mean, come on. I like it. That's a good one. Who else has thoughts? Chris, you're not going to talk about Thornton Township?
Yeah, that's like low-hanging fruit, Collin. I mean, you wouldn't let me talk about Tiffany Henyard any other day of the year. Why should we close out the year with Tiffany Henyard? I guess I can. Clown of the Week is Tiffany Henyard because you just lost the Democratic caucus in Thornton Township. Now, granted, it was kind of a raucous affair. I think they would probably have been better off doing a primary than doing a caucus for this. But it looks like she will be losing the super in Supermare going into 2025. Shout out Napoleon Harris for launching a successful takeover of the township. Even though for some reason, everybody thinks he doesn't live in the township, but I guess he does because he's going to be township supervisor now. Good for him. In any case, I guess another OG shout out That's the Orland Township Republican Committee woman, Cindy Katsinas, because she had her the first caucus in Orland Township in like ever for the Republican Party on Tuesday, and it went very well. And we nominated a slate of Republicans to run for the township in Orland Township. So good job.
Nice. Anyone else have thoughts? So I'll close up with this real quick. I've got both an OG and clown, and I can't decide which one or both to give it. I'm sure you guys all saw that Ken Griffin's condo was bought by JB Pritzker, and I can't decide, was this just like, because he obviously does real estate, so I understand that. But to me, it seems like this one's a little bit more, and this is a troll. And while I don't like Pritzker, I don't know. I got to give it up. This is like the ultimate troll to buy Ken Griffin's condo, build it up and flip it. Like, again, I'm on Team Griffin in that fight between Griffin and Pritzker. But my goodness, if this was a troll, and I think it was, billionaires play a different game than we do. And that really is the ultimate troll. So
and the condo's in the Park Hyatt too,
Yeah. I don't know. Again, these billionaires live in a different world than we do. Anyways, all right, we're going to close it down.
What about nominating OGs? I would nominate Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and Dana White and JD Vance. JD Vance did a fabulous interview with the New York, very hostile, very adversarial, and very, very good interrogating New York Times reporter. If you haven't listened to that, you should. And then Rogan did, the Musk interview podcast and the Trump podcast, both riveting. And I think they made a big difference, and White arranged for that.
Nice. All right, let's close this down. I've abused your time too much. Thank you, everybody. As always, our guests, our participants get a chance to finish off with whatever they'd like to finish off with. I'll start with our team so that our guests can get the final word. Chris, go ahead. Your final thoughts for the week.
Me going first. Okay, so this might be the last podcast of the year for the Core Strategies crew and the Smoke-Filled Room podcast. So everybody have a Merry Christmas. Enjoy and spend some time with your family. Stop focusing on politics too much. And get ready for 2025 because there's going to be primary elections February 25th, and you may need to vote for those depending on where you live. So take the holiday season. Merry Christmas.
Butler, last thoughts, possibly even for the year.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Well, if this is the last episode, I got to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We got a lot of opportunities ahead of us in 2025. Let's get some good people elected and get after it.
All right, Dennis, thanks for being with us. What are your final thoughts?
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Thanks again for having me on for the third time.
The third time, and you've been great. We're glad having you. Appreciate you being with us. I know you got a lot going on. Don Tracy, your final thoughts for the week. Thanks for being with us.
2026 is what I'm focusing on right now. I think we all should be. If we're going to change the map, it starts then. We have to have a really good, strong governor candidate. And I think the state party needs to help that by endorsing, because we need to make sure that a candidate that can win the general gets out of the primary, which has been a challenge in Illinois recently. Other states do that. The NRSC did that, and that's why they won the Senate, in my opinion. And so we need to, it's a controversial issue, but the state party needs to seriously consider endorsing a gubernatorial candidate and maybe even a U.S. Senate candidate in 2026.
Interesting. That's something we'll have to absolutely cover.
You probably do a whole show on that issue.
Yeah, I think let's plan on it. Lane's making notes on the back end, our producer. Let's do it. I like it. Travis Weaver, you brought the heat, my friend. You get the final word.
You're very kind. Two things. First, I want to piggyback after what Don said a little bit. I think the goal should always be to elect the most conservative person in a primary who can win a general. I'm a very conservative person, downstate, farm kid, gun-owning, Christian. I mean, you name it, small business, I'm very conservative. But if the person can't win the general, there's no point in electing him in the primary. Got to elect the most conservative person that can win. My next thing, bit of advice. I've taken the last month to do a little bit of a political detox. No Morning Wire, no Megyn Kelly, no Ben Shapiro. Elections behind us, get it out of your system. So now everybody listening, you got your last shot in the arm. You listen to the SFR podcast. Make sure to take some time over the holidays to get back to sunshine and rainbows and family and life. Come back in the new year energized to go hit the ground running.
I appreciate it, and I couldn't endorse that more. I'm spending the next couple of weeks with my little boy, and I don't care about politics. You all, the Madigan could be sent to jail, and I don't think I'd even have interest in doing an episode then. We can talk about it in January. By then, I'm sure it'll be all played out. But final thoughts from me, just real quick. For those who have watched and listened, we've been doing this for a year and a half. I'm not so cocky to think that everything that we've done has worked. So what we're doing is we're going to be putting out a survey. The link is going to be available to you in the email we put out, in the YouTube description if you're watching this on YouTube. Please click on that. There's a number of questions on, do you like this? Do you like that? Would you prefer this over that? Are there changes you'd like to see? We're looking at doing this again moving into next year so we can try to do what we can to help Republicans win. But we want to know, can we be even better in this next cycle? So please take that survey, give us your thoughts so we can try to evolve and get even better as we go into this next cycle. Otherwise, as has been said, if this is our last episode for December, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. We will catch you all in the new year. Thank you to Lane Davis, who works his butt off. Thank you to our participants and guests. And whenever our next episode will be, we will see you then.